Hey, this is Shane with Social Freedom Tribe. I wanted to do a video real quick on creativity and how it connects to like the third key flow and how this all comes together to really heal social anxiety. So I found that basically there's a mindset of like staying away from failure. That's like the biggest mindset that causes social anxiety. It's like, oh, I can't fail. I need to not fail. And it's very interesting because actually failure is actually like a really subjective thing. It's a subjective way of judging what we're doing or saying or what's happening in the world. And like if I say I need to move my head to the right and I move it this way, it's like, oh, that's not what I said I was going to do. It's like failure. It's like we're labeling something as failure, and that's not the best example. But maybe that was failure, coming up with that example. However, it's just like when we drop this whole judging thing, this whole like, this is failure, this is success, this is what we're supposed to do, this is what we're not supposed to do. When we just drop this whole labeling and judging and saying this is how things are supposed to go and all of this, it's when we start actually like really tapping into this creative mindset of like, whoa, there's no rules, there's no anything. And it's a really it's a pretty trippy mindset to be in. Like when you're in this state of pure creativity, it's slightly scary because it's like a way of like, oh, before I had this certain way of like identifying myself. I'm exactly this identity. And when we're tapped into this creative mindset, we're kind of like washing away all identities, all judgments, all the things like that. And all of these things, all these labels just like wash away. And it kind of washes away our own identities of ourselves and like our ego. And our ego is just like resisting that. And it's just like, no, I don't want you to let go of these identities. I don't want you to let go of this very like strict way of seeing the world. And it's like a battle. And it sucks because we actually think our ego is us, and so we don't actually see the ego as just a part of our brain that's kind of like, okay, it's got the helm, and we're like being taken along the ride, and we can like take this person off this steering wheel and put our real selves behind the steering wheel. It's hard to do that. And when we end up like detaching from this egoic identifying or labeling or judging, then we could start getting tapped into this creative way of saying, actually, there is no such thing as failure or success. That's just subjective labeling, and it's not an objective truth. Like, I moved my head to the left. That's truth. When I say that that means I failed, that's subjective. That's something that I'm placing on it, and it doesn't actually exist. If I can just take off that whole, I'm gonna label what is failure and what is success, then it's just moving my head to the left. And from that place of like, there is no failure, there is no success, like we can really tap into this creativity of just going with the flow, going with whatever. If I move my head to the left, it's not failure. If I move my head to the right, it's not failure. If I move it forward, it's not failure. It's like I can move wherever. If I move my arm instead, it's not failure. And when we apply this to different domains that are like constantly telling you, no, you have to do it this way. You have to like, and they're like forcing you to stay within these bounds, and they're basically forcing you to not be in an entrepreneur mindset where you're actually like taking the domain and you're at the steering wheel of where that domain is going next. They're more forcing you to just be like the employee. So it's like an entrepreneur versus like employee. Employee meaning like the entrepreneur is just telling you what to do. Like they're the ones that are on this creative flow and they're changing the domain and like all that, and then they're just telling all the people under them saying like, hey, you just have to follow what I say. And it's in a way, it's like it's fun being the kind of employee in the way it's like, oh, I got this process, I have this whole like I'm being told how this domain works, how this world works, and I can like learn just through that. And I would recommend that everybody just follows these processes, and when we join a new domain, just like what is the process? Like teach me all this stuff, and I'm just going to follow exactly, and I'm going to believe exactly. I believe that's amazing, and but once we go through that and we start really like mastering this employee of the domain, then I believe it's best if we just start dropping the labels and like way it has to be, and start getting more into this entrepreneur driving of creativity of that domain. And we can, from there, we can let go of the bounds of this domain versus this domain. Like we can play lacrosse or some kind of sport and then go to physics, and where these two domains seem very separate, we can learn from the sport and apply it to physics, and we learn from physics and apply it to the sport, and we can take all these things that we learned in physics and say, actually, what I learned in this sport was I'm going to change this and this and this, and like maybe the physics people or be like, whoa, no, you have to follow us exactly, but you have some kind of drive where you're dropping the bounds, you're dropping the labels, you're dropping like it has to be this way, and you're creating something, you're combining with these two different ideas, these two different domains, and putting it into this new thing. And you're gonna get resistance. Like the creative minds always get like really resistant because other people are also in their egoic identifying this is the way it should be states. And once we get past that resistance, we can just like really tap into this creativity of like, what is this thing that I'm building? And realize that like even physics is just a way of subjectively saying what an objective thing is. Like the number 2 doesn't actually exist. We just point at two different objects and we say that's 2. We're labeling 2. So like it's like math doesn't really exist. It kind of just exists in our mind. We can point at two objects and we can say that's actually a trillion because it's made up of different atoms, and you combine all the atoms, it's actually a trillion. So you can point at the same objects and say it's a completely different number. This might not be making sense, but I'm just saying like there's these ways that we just label things and we're really set on this is definitely this. But once we drop that, we can actually realize, oh, it's this, and it's this, and it's this, and it's this. And we can find different ways of labeling the same thing. I know a lot of people that just kind of like, they're coaches or therapists or something like that, and they see some kind of patient or they see some person, and because of their framework of how they coach or how they do their therapy, they say, oh, this person's in their victim mentality, or this person is just triggered, or this person is going through trauma. They have different ways of labeling the same objective truth. This person is maybe the objective truth is this person has stiff muscles and they're talking about their past, and yet multiple people have different subjective interpretations of that given their field, their domain. And there's a way that it's like, that's great, and like we can really learn from those domains and from those fields by saying, oh, this is a great way of just like, oh, this is what the person is going through, cool, I learned about it, and here's what I do from there. And then there's a way that we can master that and just have that as like a little lens, like a colored lens that we can look through, and we can also choose to not take that lens, that really good lens, and then super glue it to our face so that we can't ever take it off. We can take this lens and we can put it on and say, okay, this person's on their victim mentality, I heard that this is what you do, and then we could take it off and then try a different lens, and we could say, actually this person is going through trauma and they're triggered or something like that, and this is what I learned to do from there. And then from that place we can, once we like really tap into this skill of like different frames or different ways of seeing things, and we can take these perspectives off and say, I really believe in this, and I'm going to take this off and see it a different way. We can start tapping into this creative mindset where we take these two different lenses that we learned, that other people only learned one lens because they're like, has to be the way. We could take that lens off, learn another one, and we have two different lenses, and we can like choose which one we have, or we can combine it in a creative way where this person is triggered going through trauma and they're in victim mentality, and I have a new formation of the way I see things, and we can form a new idea, a new field, a new way of driving our fields into a new area, and then suddenly we're the entrepreneurs. We're giving this creativity to a domain that just didn't see things that way because they don't have your experiences. They don't have the fields that you've particularly went through, the things that you've particularly learned. So they're not seeing it, and because they're not seeing it, they're in resistance to what you're saying. However, you can tap into this using your own confidence and your own experience with these different fields. You can like take years of learning physics, and you can take years of learning a sport and then combine it and then form this new thing. And other people maybe have not, the other people in physics have not done this sport, so they don't see your perspective, but they're going to have their own things where they take physics and they apply it to math, or combine it with math, they combine it with engineering, they combine it with cooking, and they're going to have their own creative ways of seeing things. And yes, it's great that we're having this field and we can like talk this common language. I don't think if I'm meeting somebody and I realize that they're speaking German, and if I know German, I should probably speak German and not French or something like that. It's like, let's speak the same language in this framework, and while speaking German, let's have in the back of our mind what we've learned from French, and we can start changing the perspective of the German language. And we can speak that language of physics when we're talking to physics people, and then start slowly combining like metaphors from sports or something, like a new way of seeing things. And really, like, physics is just like it admits itself that it's not fully correct and it doesn't know everything, and it's so like learning it, you're going to find a roadblock where it's like, this is our best guess, like quantum physics, this is our best guess. We don't actually know what these electrons are doing when they're moving. Like, we think it's a wave, we think it's a particle or whatever, and both are wrong and both are true, so this is our best guess. And we can like take quantum physics and we can start finding different ways of explaining it through different domains, and then we can actually like at one point get closer and closer to the truth by using the creative mindsets from different domains. And once we really tap into this creative ability, we can start like healing social anxiety, because we stop labeling things as failure, we stop labeling things as success, and we start like really getting into what will happen. And that's the question that I'm really excited when I hear, because it's not like, what should I do? Because like the question of what should I do assumes that there is a right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things. What should I do? Why would there be a should? Why would there be a should? You should say this. Like what would determine whether you should or should not say that thing? Because are you basing it off of what I would say or what I would do? Because I've had my own experiences and I don't even think that there's a should for me. So like, what is this should based off of? Oh, well, I want to get success. I want to get a good reaction. Well, I mean, that could be good. It's like an intention of, I want to go towards this. And then it's like it's the next step from should, I think. It's like, oh, it's not that there is a should, I want to have this intention, I want to go towards this thing, and how do I get towards that thing? And I think that's a step up from should, because should is just like, there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way to do things, and that's just not true. It's a subjective way of describing actions and words, like oh, that's failure, that's you shouldn't do that, you should do that, and that doesn't actually exist. So asking that question assumes that there is a right and a wrong. However, like if we get into more like, oh, I have an intention, but like how do I get to that intention? I think it's a level up, and I don't think that that's fully the most leveled up. And I think past that is just like letting go of intention, or saying like, yeah, that would be great, and like having this just as like a lens of like, okay, I have this intention, I want to move towards it, and like really like having clear goals and stuff like that. That's great. And then there's a way that we can like drop that, and we can say, something I see as even more of a level up from that, as what would happen if I did this? And that's where I'm really excited when I see people tap into, because it's like it's less into this place of, oh, there is a right or wrong, and then out of a place of like, I need to like manipulate and I need to go towards this thing. And it's like, I wonder what would happen if I said this thing, and then maybe something wrong, maybe something bad happens. And like when something bad happens, meaning like some kind of reaction where you have bad emotions as a reaction to the reaction. So I say something, there's some kind of response, and because of that response, I feel negative in some manner. And I say, like, if I can get out of that whole, like, oh, I failed, and just into, I said something, and here was what happened. So if I say something and then, oh, I get anger as a response, and I feel defensive, or I feel hurt from this anger. Now I can just memorize, when I say this thing, this is the response I had, and this is how I felt. And I can just memorize that, and I can just take it out of this, I failed, I need to do it right kind of way, and I could just say, cool, I remember that now. And now we can step out of this perfectionist mindset of like, I need to be perfect, I need to never fail, like as if failure exists before it. And we can start saying, when I say this thing, results that I don't like happen, or results that I do like happen. And then from there we can just start experimenting. And then we can take it out of like this whole egoic understanding of like, oh, I have all this knowledge and I'm just going to go with theoretical speaking and theoretical acting, and the kind of like, I think we all have this friend where basically they have like kind of like a set list, like a comedian has a set list where they're not like really flowing creatively, and they're not like wittily responding to what you're saying. It's more like they have like this joke and there's like questions in it to like add you into it. But when you say something that's kind of unexpected, they like pretend like you said the thing that they were expecting and like go on with it. And there's a way that's like, oh, there's like something weird going on here. Oh, it's like you're just in monologue mode, and my response doesn't actually alter the way that you say this joke. And like, this is not a going back and forth thing. This is just kind of like you doing your set list. Oh, okay. And there's a way that it's like, once we get out of this theoretical like way of speaking, this like, oh, I have this story, I have this way of acting, and like this is how it's going to go. I'm going to predict this conversation. Like, we can start getting into this witty going back and forth where the other person is actually excited to create this conversation with you, rather than you controlling the whole conversation because you want a certain outcome. And it's a way of like, we can, through this like witty going back and forth, we're actually helping ourselves, because we're slowly learning, whoa, this action, this thing that I did, this sentence that I said led to something that I like, or led to something that I don't like. And both are good information. Like when I quote unquote fail and I like get negative emotions, it's just something that I remember, and I now have more in my memory banks for the rest of my life, that this thing leads to this. And I can start doing patterns and like, why is that true? And I can put pattern recognition of all these experiences when I'm just like throwing myself out there, and I could say, oh, I think when the person is talking about themselves and it's like something like a really emotional thing, and I respond with just like not even acknowledging what they said, and kind of like going into my own story or whatever is going on with my own day, there's a way that it seems like the pattern is like every time that person starts looking down and starts disengaging from me, and I kind of feel like lonely, and I feel like they're drifting away from me, and I feel like really sad and hurt with that. Now it's like the person that's like theoretical is like, oh, I have to speak like this, and now the other person of just like, that's like figured that out, like they failed, is now going through the rest of their lives saying, when like they come across these situations where this person is really sharing their heart, and they're like, oh, that reminds me of the story I want to say, and as soon as it starts coming up, it's like, oh, I remember when like I felt negative emotions when I did that last time, and then they like stop it and they like do the opposite because they learned, and they're just like, where, like where can I just bring them in and like acknowledge their existence and acknowledge what they're saying, and they start like learning like how to really connect to this person in like an amazing way. And I just love seeing this because there's like so much learning and connection that happens from this place of like, oh, I learned from my experiences, and not this theoretical place. And I love this whole witty back and forth because when I had this Christian friend, and we just like went back and forth and like speaking like the Bible, and like what I learned and like what he learned from the Bible and stuff. I'm not Christian, but it was just like amazing to go back and forth with this person. Greg, if you're listening to this, like, I love you, bro. That was this incredible conversation. And this person is going to change the world. And yeah, it was like this like whole like, it wasn't a monologue, it wasn't a speech. Neither of us were in a speech. It was just kind of like, I would say something, he would build off of it, I would build off that, he would build off that, and we're building off each other and creating this new thing and creating insights within ourselves, and we're both getting excited and into flow, and 4 hours passed by, and it's like, whoa, 4 hours passed by. That was just so surprising. And now we both have like this love for each other and this excitement for the world, and we're both feeling like really good, and that's what I want for everybody. I don't want this whole, I'm going to learn how to stay safe and I'm going to learn these exact steps. I want this whole, like, I'm thriving in conversations and people are loving the conversations that they're having with me, and I'm getting all this recognition and love that I'm not even like, I'm like, oh, I want this, but I'm not like acting in a place of like, how do I get this? I'm just like doing things and like recognizing that, oh, these actions like lead to this flow state. They lead to this recognition. They lead to money. And like I don't think going for money is bad. I just think that it's like when we learn how to do things in like an intuitive manner that just bring about great things, that's when I really see people thrive. And I hope that we can all tap into this sense of creativity, because your experiences are so valuable to the world. And I love you all, and I hope you have a very creative day today. Peace.